Okay, this is our second video on fats and lipids. So now we're going to start with digestion. So digestion of fats and lipids primarily begin in the stomach. In the stomach, you've got pancreatic lipase that helps break down the fats. Remember, ACE is anything that breaks things down. You've also got bile. What bile does is it really helps the fats mix with the hydrochloric acid and the other digestive juices in your stomach. Because remember, fats and lipids are hydrophobic, just like the salad dressing, and they don't mix very well, right? They don't mix. And so what the bile does is it allows these things to mix together. So bile is made in the liver, and it's stored in the gallbladder. What happens if you ever hear about somebody that has to get their gallbladder removed is they cannot store bile. They can make it, so they can get some that goes straight from the liver into the stomach, but they can't store it. So what that means is if they eat a very fatty meal, then they will have trouble digesting it. And basically, anytime you don't fully digest something, it's going to give you diarrhea. It's going to be really unpleasant. So anybody that's had their gallbladder removed may have to be careful not to eat too much fat at one meal. Okay, so the bile is released in the stomach, and the fatty acids mix with the water and the other digestive juices in the stomach. Okay, then things are broken down. All these fats, these lipids are broken down into packages called micelles, and then absorbed in the small intestines. So the shorter chains go straight to the liver. They go directly into the blood, into the liver, and they're reprocessed in the liver, right? The liver, lots of what it does is reprocessing things, moves things around from one place to another. It doesn't not necessarily move them around from one place to another, but it repackages things. It repurposes them, right? It might take the building blocks of some of these fatty acids and make other fatty acids from them that your body needs. So your longer chains, right? Because we've got those carbon chains in our triglycerides. The longer ones aren't absorbed directly into the blood. They first go to the lymph system, which is an alternative lymph system, and then our alternative circulation system, sort of, and then from there it goes on into the blood. Okay, so long-chain fatty acids made into chylomicrons. Everything's carried via the lymph, and then when things go from your liver, they're repackaged, right? When these things go to your liver, they're repackaged as very low-density lipoprotein, LDL, which is low-density lipoprotein, and HDL, high-density lipoprotein. So if you look at figure 512 in your book, it shows you how the chylomicrons are very high in fat, very low in protein. Very low-density lipoproteins, high in fat, not so much protein. LDLs have a little bit more protein, and HDLs have a lot more protein. So HDLs are what we consider usually the healthy lipoproteins, right? These are the healthy components and lipids in your blood. They're actually good. So when we're looking at risk factors for someone's health, having high HDL is actually a negative risk factor. So it actually counts for you instead of against you when we're testing the cholesterol in your blood, right? And you can think of HDL as the healthy cholesterol. Just think H, healthy, right? Very, very easy. The other way you can kind of think about it is think about the VLDL and the LDL. Think of them like somebody who's overweight, like a big person with lots of fat, right? And not healthy. You can think of the HDL as a bodybuilder, strong guy, lots of muscle, lots of protein, strong person. That's the healthy one, right? So that's very important to understand that HDL is the healthy cholesterol. Okay. So what do we do with this fat and cholesterol? Well, obviously we use it for energy. We use the fat for energy, right? We've got 4 calories per gram. Remember, we've also had the appropriate macronutrient distribution range, 20 to 35% of our calories. Okay. Fat also absorbs fat-soluble nutrients and carries them, right? So we'll talk later on about vitamins and fat-soluble vitamins, and fat-soluble vitamins are carried in the fats, right? If you don't have fats to carry with them, then to carry them, then you're not going to be able to absorb these nutrients. So fat carry other things. Fat also adds flavor and texture to our food. Fat makes us feel full. Fat is very useful. We also talked already about insulation, insulating your organs, your myelin sheath, those sorts of things. We've also got a group of fatty acids called essential fatty acids. So remember, essential means that your body can't necessarily make something, right? That's what essential means. So essential fatty acids are involved in maintaining your skin and connective tissues, health, your nerves, your cell membranes. They also help your body make compounds called eicosanoids, which are important for blood pressure, clotting information, and lots of other things, right? So fats are very important. We have to have fat just like we have to have carbohydrate and protein. Okay, so how much and where from? We talked about appropriate macronutrient distribution range. We talked about essential fatty acids. Ideally, 5, maybe 10% of your fatty acids should be essential fatty acids, so that's good. You can read a little bit more about that in your book as well. You've also got the recommendation to avoid saturated fats and trans fats. So let's talk about saturated fats. Remember saturated fats? Remember all the carbon molecules in the chain have hydrogen. We talked about that early in this PowerPoint, video number 1. So trans fats are when saturated fats are artificially made. That's basically what a trans fat is. It's artificially human-made trans fat that does not occur naturally. Okay, so trans fats have a purpose. Primarily what they do is they tend to make food taste the way people want it to taste, and they also do not spoil as quickly. So that's what trans fats are for, and that's why companies use trans fats. Trans fats and saturated fats are not necessarily healthy. So there's been a big backlash against trans fats. And you see all these foods that say trans fat-free. Make sure that you understand that trans fat-free does not mean fat-free. The food still has fat, just doesn't have this specific type of unhealthy fat. I've got an article that you read on Blackboard that's about the trans fat ban in New York, and think about what you think of that. Do you think that trans fat ban is okay? I personally think that people should be able to eat whatever kind of fats they like, and that restaurants should be able to put it in there if they'd like, and so there's no necessarily reason to ban it. You can't ban everything that is unhealthy, right? Big Macs are unhealthy if you eat too many of them as well, but they're not against the law. Okay, so let's look at nutrition labels and where to see our fat, right? So we've got 2 foods here. These both are actually chili, right? One of them is a bean chili. This one on the right is a bean chili. This other one is primarily a meat chili, okay? So we can see how many calories we got. We can see immediately how many calories from fat, 142 calories from fat. Right, our total fat here is 15.76 grams of fat. On somebody with a 2,000 calorie a day diet, that's going to provide 24% of their daily value of fat. That doesn't mean that the food is 24% fat. If we really look at it calorie-wise, we got 142 calories from fat out of 319. It's almost half fat. Almost half the calories in here are coming from fat. See, 142 out of 319, right? But this provides 24, about a quarter of the fat somebody needs for the day, okay? It provides 6.84 grams of saturated fat. So remember, these 2 things don't add together. This saturated fat is part of the total fat, and we've got about 1/3 of our recommended saturated fat in this one. So we can look at this other food, this other bean chili, and we can see how it's got 45 grams or 45 calories from fat, right? 5 grams of fat, 2 of them being saturated, right? We should be able to know, if we know how many calories we have, we should be able to, from fat, we should be able to know how many grams we have of fat. We just divide this 45 by 9 and we get 5, right? So that's where you look at the fat on your nutrition label and how much of your daily recommended fat it will provide. Okay, so sources of fat, where are we going to get fat? Animal products are more likely to be higher in fat, specifically in saturated fats, okay? But there are exceptions, such as coconut oil and palm oil are very high in saturated fat. There was a backlash against movie theater popcorn not long ago for using the palm oil because it tastes good, but it's very high in saturated fat. So ideally, you should choose to try and avoid too much fat, too much saturated fat. You should choose lean cuts of meat, low-fat dairy products, and limit the added oils. Don't add oil and butter and add fat to things unnecessarily. Okay, so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about fat substitutes. I'll let you look at your chart on page 5.3. Understand that they can be carbohydrate, fat, or protein-based. Some of these can cause problems, okay? Some of them are not so bad. Some of the carbohydrate ones are not so bad, but the protein one, specifically olestra, is one you got to be careful with. If you'll read the package, it says specifically that it may cause anal leakage, right? So that's pretty gross, isn't it? You eat too much of something with olestra in it, you know, you might poo yourself is basically what it's telling you. So be careful with these fat substitutes. If you see any of these things in any of your foods, it's going to be written right on the label. Maybe the first time you eat it, don't eat too much, okay? The other important thing to understand about fat substitutes as well as low-fat products is that low or reduced fat products may not be low calorie. And your table 5.4 in your book tells you a little bit more about that, right? Something can still be very high calorie even though it's low fat or no fat. Okay. Also, it's very important to understand that too much fat can lead to disease, okay? Too much fat can cause heart attack, stroke, and other diseases. And this is primarily because of what we call atherosclerosis. So it's a buildup of plaque in the walls of the arteries, right? So here is a nice healthy artery. See, the blood can flow very easily through this channel here. But if you've got a diseased artery with atherosclerosis, somebody who has had too high LDL and VLDL, too fatty of a diet, doesn't get as much exercise, they're going to build up these fatty deposits. And what that does is that kind of stops up the pipe, right? Think about this like your shower drain, right? How your shower drain can get all full, right? It can get full and get all clogged up, right? If your shower drain is full of hair, then when you drop something down there, it'll stick. And this is kind of the same way. So you've got a much greater risk. If you had a little blood clot that came through here, it would just push right through. It wouldn't get stuck. Here, it gets stuck. So this is the difference between a diseased artery and a normal artery. One thing that really helps keep your arteries nice and clean is exercise, right? When you get lots of exercise and you're flushing blood quickly through these arteries, it helps keep these fatty deposits from building up. Think about what I told you about say the shower drain, right? If you could also put a big strong jet of water and hook it up to your shower drain and clean everything out and just push it all through. And that's kind of what happens when you exercise and you get your blood really pumping hard. Okay? So atherosclerosis can lead to high blood pressure, also known as hypertension. I'd like you to read in your book, specifically on table 5.5, on risk factors you can control and not control, right? Because some of these things you have a lot of control over. Some of them are just things that happen. Okay? So healthy fat intakes, really quickly. Ideally, more people would have fish and plant foods as their sources of fat rather than your fattier meats. Okay? Maintain a good weight and get exercise can help combat the effects of too much fat, and maintaining a healthy weight keeps you from getting the atherosclerosis. Exercise also boosts your HDL, right? HDL, very important. Remember, that's the good cholesterol, the healthy cholesterol, all right? So make sure and read everything in your book. Cover the top 10 points to remember. Look at the definitions in your margins, all those sorts of things, and you should do pretty well on the test and have a good grasp of everything.